Welcome back to the Mayor's Update, everybody. We're very lucky tonight. We have a special guest, Andrew Sloan, the Mayor of Central Elgin, along with Mayor Joe Preston, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Volkswagen plant and how the two municipalities can work together. So we're very excited to bring this to you. We really appreciate Mayor Sloan taking the time to share with us tonight.
Does that make tonight Mayor's Update?
Yeah, totally.
It's how many mayors can we have on the same screen?
We're going to find out.
Next week, Grayden, you have to be out of that chair. We have another mayor we're bringing in.
I have more microphones.
Yeah, more microphones.
And more cameras if we need them.
Look, Andrew, thank you. Mayor Sloan, it's great to have you here. I think that there's a lot of people in Southern Ontario, but certainly in between St. Thomas and Central Elgin, that would love to hear us both talk about where we're at and what we're trying to do. We haven't been perfect on this because, I mean, you and I have talked about this kind of off air and personally about we've been controlled somewhat by non-disclosure agreements. When you're dealing with a company as large as Volkswagen, we now know it's Volkswagen, and forever we couldn't even say who that was, right? I keep saying it, and I said it to council in here on Monday night in a private session, that, look, if Volkswagen gets a little on this, right? They're the ones spending billions of dollars in Southern Ontario. I want them to have a good day in the sun, right? So some of the stuff they're not yet letting us say has to do with Volkswagen's ability to launch their own successful conversation. I get it. I was on a Zoom today with the president from Volkswagen, a couple of other higher-ups from Volkswagen, and the premier and Vic Fideli, and we talked a lot about what are we doing, how are we getting down here to make an announcement. So there will be one of those, and it will be soon, where we all get together and talk about what the the big pieces are to this. But when somebody comes to me today and says, well, Mayor Preston, tell me, how many jobs does this mean? And I said, I'm sorry, you're going to have to wait to let Volkswagen tell you. It's their show, and it's big, and we want to do it. Well, why did you have to do something this way? Well, there's still a line or two that we can't share.
So you are both pure purview to what's going on. What can you tell us?
Well, I guess mostly what you already know. I mean, and I think there'll be parts that Mayor Sloan will say, but we weren't able to know that, and I get that. I really do get that. We had to purchase a certain amount of land. I'll be the first to admit we started off with about an 800-acre parcel of land, right? And we were all very aware of that. And then when the Ontario government and our help started to go out looking for worldwide people who could be there, every one of them came back and said, no, it has to be quite a bit bigger than that. Oh, okay. Didn't know that, and let's go out and buy some more then. Let's go attach to it. We recognize that in St. Thomas, that piece of land worked very well for us because it's attached kind of to our servicing and our industrial park. But we couldn't put up a big notice and say, oh, things just changed last week, and by the way, we're going to make it bigger because what we're getting is bigger. I mean, this is a large facility that Volkswagen is building. So that's kind of how we got to there.
And there was a healthy dialogue at the Chamber of Commerce Mayor's Luncheon. That was before the announcement, before everyone was able to know what was coming down the pike. What can you guys tell us now after the announcement?
It's Volkswagen. I mean, it's truly Volkswagen and its PowerCo, their battery subsidiary. It will be the largest automotive-based industrial facility in Canadian history. That's a piece that's now been used by Minister Champagne from the federal government. So we now know we can say that too. But an awful lot of the rest of the questions, Grayden, still come down to, we want Volkswagen to make that announcement. How many employees will be there? What's the size of the factory? Can we add subsidiaries to it? All of those things, yes, to some of them is the answer. But other than a yes or no, I can't give you the specifics on how we got there.
Can you tell us how you're working together at this point in time to make things better? Now that the announcement's there, we know there's going to be support for housing that's going to be needed.
Yes.
There are other services that are going to come in. There are other industries that will come to support the Volkswagen plant. Are you guys talking about that?
Well, and Andrew and I, Mayor Sloan and I, have had conversations not only about that, but how we will satisfy even what Central Elgin gets out of this. That there will be, as part of Bill 63, we put together, we know we must negotiate, we know we must talk about what the benefits will be and how it will be. But even just before we went on tonight, we're kind of talking about, but what else does that mean? There's a lot of, we're neighbors. We're right next beside each other. And we can do some things together in a shared service point of view that can make St. Thomas and Central Elgin both healthier. Look, talking to the Minister of Housing in Ontario in the next short period of time, the St. Thomas and district home builders, and we're trying to have a kind of a summit. What does this mean? How will we address the thousands of workers it will need? And it can't all be built in St. Thomas. There just isn't a chance that it can be. So Mayor Sloan and I have to work together. Is what does that mean? Where in Central Elgin can we do what? How can we make this work? Right?
And you talked about the benefits to Central Elgin, because 75% of the land has been reallocated from Central Elgin into the St. Thomas Municipality.
Right.
Mayor Sloan, what are you looking in terms of reciprocation from the province on that? Because it was the province's decision to do that.
Well, first of all, my congratulations. Everyone knows, and my hat's off to Mayor Preston for being a phenomenal salesperson, not just for St. Thomas, but we look at this investment for the region.
Right.
Central Elgin, sure. We've moved forward now with how things are going to be, and our only goal now is to ensure what the province said, that we are made whole.
Right.
And we are beginning talks with a facilitator, but in advance of that, I think this is important communication for Mayor Preston and I to talk about what the opportunities and challenges might be. I mean, listen, I've made clear that we support this. We are, pro Volkswagen, pro growth, pro being part of the green energy revolution, if you will. Right. But the infrastructure that's required will be significant. There will be ongoing costs for the various levels, but let me just underline that I think it doesn't surprise me. I mean, we have as I said at the mayor's lunch, we have the physical resources, the natural resources, the human resources to put us at a different level. And I understand why an investment like this would be done here in Central Elgin, St. Thomas.
Well, and I have to thank Mayor Sloan for what he's saying too. There's just no way we can do this without each other agreeing that we need to move forward on it. But there was, I admit to you, Grayden, there was a period of time where we just couldn't say, right? And that was frightening to some of the other politicians. The council before Mayor Sloan's, and even as his new council came in, bringing a breath of fresh air to Central Elgin, we couldn't all of a sudden stand up and say, by the way, here's some more stuff we know and you don't, right? And some of this politics happens in the sense of you can't negotiate if you tell the other guy what's in your hand. That's part of what was happening with Volkswagen. But going forward, it is not just about the industrial lands and Volkswagen. We've made clear, we will make Central Elgin whole in this. We will move forward with an arbitrator and do that. But that being said, we've got so much more we have to work on. As you said, there's a housing lack. There's a how will we grow? Who will, right? Our backyard backs up to their backyard, and we better be, if I kick the ball over the fence, I want my ball back, right? But we have to be the type of two municipalities that are going to be married that way forever. But what does that mean? Can we make that next row happen? Can we make the next concession road a housing piece too? If I can't tell Mayor Sloan where he should put housing in Central Elgin, but I have to, looking at any map, and next to St. Thomas seems to make sense right now, along with Belmont and Port Stanley as being alternates, but we have to say, let's do what's right for all of us. Let's see how it works.
And what's council's thought in Central Elgin at this time about that?
Well, I think council is interested in as Mayor Preston says, in representing their constituents to making sure that the revenue from the lands that are now in St. Thomas, that there's remuneration. And I think council, I went to council and said that that Mr. Flack, on behalf of the government, and now Mayor Preston, has said we'd be made whole. There are areas where we can work together on infrastructure. I don't know the specifics, and you've been in this longer than I have, but very informative chats with staff about where there's mutual opportunities, be it wastewater treatment, be it roads and other things.
Right.
But what I'm learning in my short career as a mayor of Central Elgin, that we also have costs that will be for the long term. So those are important for, I think, the council to ensure that we have the ability to look forward with our costs and what our revenues will be. So that's what we'll focus on.
Mm-hmm. So in the end, you're looking to make sure that this doesn't cost you.
Well, yeah.
Well, or there's as much benefit as there is cost, and there's a reason to do it.
Well, I think there would be, our starting point would be, the mayor said the land was priceless. I appreciated that, Joe. But I mean, if there's industrial development I think that what Central Elgin people are looking for is something that for a share of the Mr. Flack talks about a slice of the pie.
Right.
So, it used to be farmland. It's now industrial. We had some of it designated for our own industrial development. Yep. Mm-hmm. I think there might be some arguments that some of the services that'll come to the 1,500 acres could be accessed by us. Right. But these are all things that'll happen in negotiations. Mm-hmm. But I'm getting from what I'm hearing and what we're discussing, that everyone understands that Central Elgin, and back to the words of being made whole, on gaining for our constituents the ability to realize the success of Volkswagen as Central Elgin residents.
Agreed. Mm-hmm. You got to cover your bills too, right? No, and I get that. Yeah. As a local politician and a previous more federal politician, but from local, I understand. The citizens of St. Thomas want to know, what does this mean for my pocketbook? What does this mean today, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And I've heard from a number of Mayor Sloan's constituents that are asking the same thing. Mm-hmm. Joe, you're the one who kind of maybe can answer this question, and I tell you, I can't answer it out loud right now, but it is about making that citizen of Central Elgin better off today, better off 5 years from now, and better off 10 years from now. Is it partly because we're sharing some great things because of the benefit? Yeah, I think there's a way for that to happen too. Mm-hmm. But I think there's some specific costs that Central Elgin will need to have covered, probably by this plant, by the income of it happening, right? Or in some roundabout way, sharing the good stuff.
I like to mention roundabouts.
Together. Roundabouts, yeah. That's at Elm and Centennial. And have you got that under? No, it's
the county.
Yeah.
The county really has to get on the roundabout game. They've been kind of staying off it. St. Thomas has been all in on the roundabouts.
I believe there's also one out your way, isn't there?
It's on the way. But
I saw them putting stakes in the ground the other day, Grayden, when I came up your road.
Did you?
Yeah. So somebody's out there looking.
Well, they were dragging their feet on it. And I was trying to figure out why they were dragging their feet on the roundabout.
Winter.
Well, no. Then I found out there's a Volkswagen plant coming, and I'm like, well, maybe there might be some changes municipally on what's happening based on amount of traffic.
I think all of Southern Ontario is going to see a drastic change. And I mean all of Southern Ontario will see some drastic changes because of what has to happen to we're building the largest automotive industrial facility in Canadian history. We're going to have to get people back and forth to it and product back and forth to it. So I think there's some more things that we'll have to talk about in the future.
Can I just ask a quick question on that? Yeah. How is it the largest? Are you able to say?
Yeah.
Okay. Because is it size? Is it investment dollars?
I think in both cases on that one, it's a win. It's a yes. I know, if nothing else, from a square footage point of view, that will be as big as what's going to happen there for this battery plant, right? And as you know, since it's 2023, if it was built in 2022, it'd be way more expensive in 2023. So from a dollar point of view, I expect that will also be the case. But I'm going to give Mr. Bloom, who I met today from Volkswagen, the opportunity to say that, along with the minister from the federal government and the ministers from the provincial government.
Very exciting. And are they actually coming here to St. Thomas to announce this?
That's the plan. Now, it's again, I can share nothing more today than we're looking for an appropriate date for all. Mm-hmm. We know we have 3 years worth of construction on the plant. And as you saw, starting last Monday, huge amounts of work is happening on that site as we speak. As appropriately it has to. It's spring. Mm-hmm. There's certain things we have to get done so that this summer we can do real construction work. So I think that we'll see a little more telling of what's going on within the next couple of weeks. Yeah.
Very good. Mayor Sloan, are there any other topics in relation to the Volkswagen plant that you want to cover before we jump on to the next topic?
No, I'm happy to. We're able to start a process here, and the discussions like these ones are important. But I'm happy to start the good work of finding out sharing some of the benefit.
Right. And I'll share with Mayor Sloan. I'm looking forward to from a politician to a politician discussion on these things. As we started this process and involved more area in Elgin County and in Central Elgin, it was almost always staff who had to lead the project. I'm looking forward with our relationship for us to earnestly sit down and say, hey, let's take this back to staff and see if they think we've dotted all the T's and crossed the I's. And I'm sorry, I got that all wrong, didn't I? Dotted I's, crossed T's.
I mixed them up.
Right. But I think with the team you have on your new council, the team I have on this council and the support they've been, I'd love us to be having some of these conversations from I asked that of someone else. Did you put a sign in along? Because I did. Right? Did you put signs in lawn? Because I did. I'd rather have those conversations among the people who stressed out their families and did things like that. And look, and I'm not saying none of us have bad staff. We have great staff, but let's bring them into the conversation where it isn't led so much by non-politicians.
I might ask another question just to finish it.
Yeah,
As for infrastructure and how it goes, do you have timelines, or is that stuff that will come along?
Well, the timeline so far given to us from Volkswagen, from what we're trying to do with PowerCo, is the product rolls off the line there in early 2027. And so we've got construction of about 2 years and the third year of fit up of putting the equipment needed to build EV and battery in that plant. And while that's going on, a lot of that has to be delivered to the plant. So some infrastructure, especially transportation and stuff, has to be thought of today and start moving forward. I think we'll start to see the MTO and us, the City of St. Thomas, look at things as to what might be and how that would best work. Part of getting the CN rail in there really takes a lot of pressure off so that we can actually ship a lot of things by rail. But there will be a lot of employees driving to work. How will they get there? All of this stuff has to come to the surface as the layout of the site starts. But in the beginning, we really have to get the plant cleared, the site cleared, and leveled. Moving. I can't even tell you how many million pounds of dirt there is to move to make that so we could put a plant there, right?
And in terms of,
Yeah, go ahead.
In terms of transportation, I was talking to Paul, the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, and he said he was looking at gondolas. And in terms of like square footage and efficiency, it's one of the fastest public transportation systems. And he would love to see a gondola from Port Stanley into St. Thomas. And the reason it's so handy is because you just have to put a pole in, and then you put the cable on. And then you can gondola people. I don't know if it's possible.
Well, Paul and I are going to have this conversation.
It sounds amazing.
At my house all Saturday night.
Right?
I didn't hear the word gondola, but I'm not against everybody's thought as to how to best move the people we need to move in Southern Ontario. Now, I've been being fairly straight with large facilities like our old Ford manufacturing plant or even Sterling here in St. Thomas. About a third of the people that worked at those facilities were from St. Thomas. Mm-hmm. About a third of those people were from London. And the other third were from all the way around us in a tight way in Southern Ontario. I don't expect that this plant will be any different than that as to how we find the people for it.
The demographics, yeah.
And so how do I move people around St. Thomas? One question. How do I move people from London to St. Thomas? Another whole question. And how do we get them from Ingersoll, Woodstock, Blythe, Chatham to the plant is another question. So we need to look at that. Right?
Even when I worked at the Ford plant in 1990, and it was measured in days, I'm afraid I wasn't quite as good as the job as the Ford had hoped. But they had vans coming from Windsor,
yes.
like GM cargo, or pardon me, Ford cargo vans, and they had groups that got together.
The take home a van program was huge for them. They had, you were one guy, and you had 9 people you had to pick up the next morning in your van. So you went home and then picked up these 9 and brought them back to work, or
That's
8,
pretty cool.
whatever
That's quite innovative.
size of the van was.
Is there any comparison? And I'm kind of like one of your viewers, Grayden, wanting to ask questions. Is there any with the size of Ford versus Volkswagen? Do we know anything like Like, is the Ford plant, this is going to be a bigger plant than the Ford
Yes.
plant? Do we?
I can safely say that, but I can't tell you the proportion.
Got it.
It will be the biggest, and so it will be considerably more from an area point of view. But you and I both know, as technology has grown,
Right.
perhaps the amount of people needed might be less than Ford did in '67
Understood.
versus 1990. But we're going to be well off either way. These are pretty good paying jobs. So
Well, I think, and that's a key thing I've tried to talk about with people as well, is the fact that this isn't like an entry level job. Like people, I've heard the rumor, now I can't say this for sure, but I heard that the starting wage is going to be around $35 an hour and it'll go up from there. I don't know that for sure, but that's the rumor that's going around. And if that is the case, it'll be beneficial for everybody, because if you can start at $35 an hour and then work your way up full time within this area, you can own a home in Central Elgin, St. Thomas,
sure.
and Southold easily. So I think that's an exciting.
And Grayden, as I shared with you, I can't verify any of that, but it's not hard to go online and verify that Volkswagen is one of the highest paying employers in
Yeah.
every place where they are. We're not getting a slouch company here. This is a fantastic deal for St. Thomas, Central Elgin, and all of Southern Ontario. So yes. Yeah.
And that's the real key part of it. And so I guess that's what makes me excited, is that it's something that's coming here, and they're not just going to take advantage of the people and work us to the bone. They're going to maybe they'll work us to the bone, but we'll get paid well for it. I think that's the exciting
I
part.
think you'll find that Volkswagen worldwide is a very great employer, from a work ethic, workload, fun at work, that type of thing too. I've been doing a fair bit of reading of each of their other plants, and so I'm quite looking forward to the Volkswagen ethic in Southern Ontario.
Great. Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
You're a different generation. What are your thoughts from people that you're hearing from about the investment? Is there excitement with sort of people of your age, or tell me what you're hearing?
Everyone's very excited. Yeah, I mean, there are a couple outliers who are not excited. I went over to my dad and my mom's for dinner, and my dad was giving me was getting me in trouble potentially for like being involved with an industrial facility on agricultural land. But at the same time, he understands that we need jobs and we need prosperity here. Right. So it's difficult. It's not an easy thing. I think that's one of the things that everyone's talked about, is like we are losing production land that's good farmland, but at the same time, we're bringing in jobs and prosperity that we haven't really seen since the Ford plant. And speaking as someone who grew up here and has lived here my whole life, I think we need that. And I think that's really important. And it's not like we don't have, like, it's the common saying where people are saying, like, farmland's the only thing they're not making more of. But at the same time, we need to have the jobs to sustain a lifestyle here that's healthy for the whole community. And I think this will bring that here. And I think everyone in my demographic sees that, remembers the good old days, so to speak, and wants more of that for them, their family, and their children, to be honest.
Right. I saw the opportunity that Ford, and I mean, growing up, people my age, their parents, maybe one parent worked at Ford, and the other parent did something else maybe, but from dental to insurance to everything, I mean, it provided a certain quality of life back that you said about owning a house and being proud of that home. Right. There's a lot of people that in St. Thomas that Ford provided for. They did well. They had a home. They contributed to our communities, right. And that's the piece. They
built where we are today.
Right.
And they all gave back.
They did, and they also were very fiercely, interested in their communities and, good citizens. And that's the exciting part that I see of trying to get a new generation interested in, creating a life here, understanding the opportunities and challenge here, and being more active parts of their communities. I mean, the Timken Center, now Joe Thornton, but as a kid, Timken was another big contributor. Right. I don't know, you'd know Joe, there were the Timken Awards, or there was a Timken Fund. Right. And then, when Freightliner came in, it was the first air-conditioned plant in southwestern Ontario. Right. So these were all innovations that were linked to St. Thomas. And I mean, I was very upset as a person from St. Thomas when Ford closed. Not just for the many people I knew and the families that worked there, but for all the opportunity that went with it. So I'm just curious how your folks or your people your age are thinking.
Yeah, that's the gauges. And I think like there are a lot of people from my generation that want to be able to be in St. Thomas and they want to work in higher level jobs. And there isn't as much of that, or there wasn't as much of that here. And I think this is something where like people from my generation can look at working at Volkswagen and be like, okay, maybe there's a place for me there, so I can come home, I can be with my family, like my broader family.
From a scientific point of view, even a job that matches what I went away to learn, and right.
And honestly, that's what I think, that's what's exciting them, is that there's the opportunity to be with it. Yeah.
Right. Well, one of the goals of being the mayor of St. Thomas or the mayor of Central Elgin has been, how do we keep our young people living in our community? How do we have a full breadth of age ranges in our communities? We think this just solved that. Well, I mean, I really, truly do. To be able to offer the types of jobs with the scientific background that this will be in a very clean industrial facility, it's just going to be incredible. Now, my father was a Chrysler worker, and you got to see the Ford plant around the same times. These weren't always really pleasant places to go, but what they gave them was that freedom to raise a family in a community, and the family to stay at home. I'm really been hearing a lot over the last 2 weeks, last week and a half, of, you know what that means? My grandkids can stay in St. Thomas. My grandkids can stay in Southern Ontario, and right in the heart of what's great, you know, with Port Stanley where it is, and the other areas we have to grow. You just solidified this, and I hope that's exactly right. It's how I feel. I've had a rough time not smiling for the last week and a half, right? Yeah. So I believe that's what we've done. Let's see if it gets there, but that's why I was doing the research of how this employer will be in a Canadian Ontario St. Thomas site, what this will look like. I think it's just nothing but special.
Yeah, and I think in Canada we're in a job crisis right now. Like, we have Alberta running a massive campaign in our area to take our skilled labor to Alberta right now. Have you heard the radio campaigns they're playing? Right. And
well, and I worked in the steel business, and the company was one of the largest apprentice providers and training facilities in the province. But to your point and your earlier point, the biggest advantage, you could pay people a lot more to move, but they'll always come home. Right. Because that's where they want to be.
Come home.
They want to come home because friends and family are there.
Yep.
And for us, it was the tar sands in Alberta. So guys that go out, Joe, at the time you probably were flying back and forth to Ottawa. There were super elite members of working in the tar sands because the companies were flying them so much. And, you know, they had a great income, but at the end of the day,
they couldn't wait for that weekend off or that week back home, and whether it was Newfoundland or Ontario, right?
And these guys were flying all the time, and they built up so many air miles that you'd go into one of these lounges that I get a coupon for occasionally, and it'd be stacked with guys from the tar sands, right?
Yep. So, and I know people like that as well, and they've come back now. Once those jobs dried up,
home is it's like a home,
incredible.
A home and beacon is
to connect that to Southern Ontario and this plant. I had someone reach out to me this week to say one of the byproducts of what we do in the oil sands is lithium. After the processing, lithium is one of the leftover, and now there's a sale for it here in Canada. Right? I don't know if it's true or not, but boy, I'll sure take Alberta lithium over Congo lithium or wherever else it might be.
When the Premier talked about the import of keeping this stuff in Ontario, is lithium not something from the north that he was talking about, or those are other elements?
No, it's another place we can, but boy, if it can be a byproduct of a non-environmental thing like the oil sands, and we can help use that in Ontario, great, take it. Talking about the Ring of Fire and all of the ability for Indigenous lands up there to be turned into income, and I want to stay home. I live in Northern Ontario. I want to stay home. Great. Build us some roads and railways to get these products to St. Thomas, Ontario, where I now hear they're going to deal with them. Fantastic. Do it.
And that's one of our viewers, Beth August, is saying, is that VW represents stability for the region, and I agree.
Yeah. And look, I don't know how much longer I'll last, but I said this is at least a couple of decades, if not more, of the solidifying of the Southern Ontario, mid-Southern Ontario growth. It just does give us that. And Mayor Sloan, you mentioned at the beginning, there will be more industry besides this one. No one big industry comes and goes, okay, that's it, stop. Right? Yep. There's all the other ancillary industries, but I don't want to forget who we already have, whether it's the Format and the Prestrans and the Camis of this world that are already here. We've got to remember they're here too and help them keep their workforces and move forward towards it too, and make this place home for all of them.
That's actually the one thing I've heard from the business community is people are afraid that the skilled labor locally will be drained into Volkswagen. So they want to protect against that. I guess that's the biggest concern that I've heard that.
Well, boy, if that's the biggest trouble we have, okay, I'll deal with having to put everybody to work. I know, I get it. But somebody asked me that, and it may have been somebody from Volkswagen today, is how will you do this? And I said, well, about 2,000 people a day head off to Cami or to Toyota, right, from St. Thomas to work. Well, I'm sorry, if I was making that drive every day and all of a sudden I don't have to, I know what I'm going to do. The same number of people leave from London to St. Thomas to work every day and St. Thomas to London to work every day. I think we first of all have to recapture the people who actually live here and what would rather be a part of this community. They're proving it by keeping their houses here. Let's take that. Then we'll move forward on where else can we attract workers from.
All right. Well, we're running out of time here. I want to thank all the viewers. I want to thank Mayor Sloan.
We didn't even do trivia tonight.
Well, okay, I've got a trivia as a closer.
Okay.
And this will be answered after in the comments or whatever. This is a little bit harder when you're not going to find it on the websites that you would search normally for the answers to trivia. But I want you to figure out the doctor who was there when my mother gave birth to me. Which local St. Thomas doctor was the doctor that was there when I was brought into this world at St. Thomas Elgin General Hospital?
Wow. Perfect. I'm anxious to hear the answer. I know I wasn't there. But you mentioned the hospital. If we have another minute.
Yeah.
The things that we will have to do different in St. Thomas because of this, and in St. Thomas, Central Elgin, Southwold, right? St. Thomas Elgin General Hospital services a very wide geographic area. But if we add this type of growth to us, do we ever have to add to what our hospital has to be able to do too? These are the good things that happen because. Somebody guess?
Sharon Anderson, our #1 trivia star, has guessed Dr. Sloan, who is Andrew's father.
I thought that would be the case, but I didn't want to give it up.
Well done. Very well done.
He had very few regrets, but I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
that's a terrible joke. Terrible joke.
It's fair.
Yeah.
It's
I
very
remember,
fair.
and let me say that I remember going to your family farm picking strawberries in 1983 or 4 with my aunt who came every summer from Montreal, and I got mad because there was nothing to do, and I walked down Sparta Line, and they ended up picking me up near where Suzanne Ferguson lived. But
I would leave the farm sometimes too, and then my parents have to find me because it wasn't, I didn't find a lot to do there.
Well, it's a straight line in either direction, folks.
Right. So I just had to go and find Grayden on his little bicycle.
Yep.
I'm going to find something fun to do.
that was 82. When were you born?
83.
Okay, about the time of year.
Yeah.
And do they still have the farm there?
They do.
Great.
Yeah. They're still going. My dad was doing research plots for EFAO, very exciting stuff on no-till potatoes.
Right.
Had some great results. My sister's also been farming there, and she does catering as well.
Does she?
Yeah.
Do you still have the heavy horses?
We do. The Suffolk Punch draft horses. It was Belgians back then.
Was Belgians.
When
I
you were
remember
there.
that.
And
Says Dr. Sifton had Belgians as well.
that's right. And he was just down the road. And so, when I was about 9, my dad had me out on the discs. Like, I couldn't imagine putting a 9-year-old child like behind the reins of 2 large draft horses.
Right.
But for some reason, I survived.
I don't know, put a child of 9 behind the steering wheel of a Buick, but it all happened on the first thing I ever drove was a old Massey, and right, and I suppose I could have run that off the road, but I didn't.
Well, I put one tractor in the ditch and broke off a wheel, and I think we had to get the McKinleys who were just down the road to like pull the tractor out. But
you had draft horses, you could pull the tractor.
Well, see, I was told to use the horses, and I was like, no, mom and dad are away. I'm going to use the tractor, no big deal. And of course, anyway. Was a big deal.
It was, right? Yeah.
Mistakes were made. Listen to your parents, folks.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions tonight? We've covered a lot of ground and almost no questions from the...
We've got Susan Marquette says, not a question, but he's saying, get on him, Andrew, as opposed to, I think, in terms of between you and Mayor Preston, in terms of Central Elgin. And I think we covered a lot of that.
And we're not done.
We're just starting.
Yeah.
I mean, I think pragmatically it's gone through the House. We've got the changes have been made. We have an announcement that it's Volkswagen. I think it's in all our best interest to work together on making sure that this is good news for the region, as opposed to one versus the other. And looking forward to starting those conversations.
And I think as someone who grew up in Central Elgin, has a studio in St. Thomas, works in St. Thomas, lives in Southold. I want everybody to work together. I want to see the benefits. I can't. It's a fear of missing out, FOMO for municipalities.
Right.
I don't know.
Yep.
How do you want to describe it? And that's where I think there's a huge amount of benefit to be had in working together.
It is about all of us, a high tide rising all boats, and it really is. And I'll be the first to say that's exactly the image I want to portray. That we will all be way better off because of this, and we've got some steps to go yet, but I commit to doing them. And I know that Mayor Sloan and I have had that conversation, and we will do it. And he's got a great new council who wants to talk a lot about it too. So we're happy to do it.
Good.
Yeah. And Mark McKnight says working together is a good feeling. Absolutely
Thank
agree.
you.
Well,
Thank
I
you,
mean,
Margaret.
people, Joe's as proud of his community as I am of ours. I mean, I grew up in St. Thomas. We went to Port Stanley, now live there, farm in Central Elgin as well. But there's a lot of pride in the people watching from Central Elgin. I mean, they want to be as much a part of this as the people from St. Thomas, though I think they want to make sure that they're, they have a slice of the pie as well. And that's first and foremost on my mind. So I appreciate the comment.
Oh, and I certainly want to keep, no doubt, keep reminding me too, and whoever said, hey, Andrew, stay on them, I want you to do the same thing. No, it is. This is, we can't let this go. This is about proving to the area how well we can work together and how we can all benefit when it happens.
And I think too that, Joe, that there'll be some, as they say, challenging conversations. But I fundamentally find that the people that elected us, or either of us, want people to get along. We're not, there's banging the table sort of stuff is not going to help in this. We're keeping open communication channels, and I think that's an approach. Maybe in 6 months, we'll
prove them all right.
Well, I mean,
we can do it.
Well, we've got some metrics that we can use for our people, and they'll be able to look and say, okay, we benefited from this, and I'm happy to work with you on that.
Yeah, great. And I'm happy to have the mayor of Central Elgin right next to St. Thomas being a good friend. I think this really works for us. And
well, you're quite a salesperson, I have to say.
Well, it's what I do. I mean, don't try this at home. I do this professionally. And trust me, I'll share any of that too. No, look, we got lots of great stuff before we get to the stuff we have to argue about.
Okay.
I used to say that all the time in Ottawa. I got along with all but one or two members of Parliament in other parties because I could find I had 80 to 90% of stuff we all agreed on. Right. And let's do the 80-90 first, right? Let's get all the good stuff we can get done. And it comes down to the hard push on the final five. Fine. It'll be easy to do.
But in looking at the former mayors tonight, you look at yourself or former Mayor Peters, again, a guy that was universally liked, regardless of party line, and other politicians that have, and St. Thomas is expecting that, and Central Elgin's expecting there to be, some collegiality.
Well, here's a challenge for you. I have a council of 8, and 2 of them are former mayors.
Oh, right.
Don't think I don't get advice. Okay. Between Mayor Peters and Mayor Kohler, right?
Oh my God, I forgot.
Right? Yeah, and the rest. Look at some fairly solid members of council.
Very
too.
solid.
Look, it is about hearing what they have to say, or at least convincing them why we're heading in this direction. But look, Steve's been such a great friend from when he was the member of provincial parliament and I was the member of parliament, and we were from different parties. And people used to always say, "What are you two doing, talking to each other?" You know what we're doing? We're getting great stuff for Southern Ontario, for certainly Elgin County, because we'll both go back to our levels of government and say, "Here's the project we need." And we got everything when we asked for the same one, and we got nothing when we both went and did our own thing. So look, you and I need to play the same game as we did there. It's more about, hey, what's good for all of us? Let's get it done, right? And I'm willing to play. I want it to happen. Right?
Absolutely. Well, mayors, thanks for joining us. Thanks to our viewers and our sponsors, and we'll see you next week. We look forward to carrying on this conversation.
Right. And I ask Andrew, please come back as often as you want. Some of this really gets to Central Elgin as well as it gets here. So look, at any time you want to share our conversations, we're happy to have one every Wednesday night if you want.
All right.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. Cheers. Have a good night, everybody.